if I was an outsider and I just wanted to go say, what is the interaction between black men and black women, I would walk away with a negative understanding of how we communicate with each other. If you look at the chat, it's gonna be like black men, y'all bullet bags. Black women, y'all responsible for the birth rates in the community, and all of that stuff. It does not present a united front, and it also lends credence to if somebody wants to paint a narrative and go any type of way, they can grab clips of that and take it in or out of context and spin that completely in an opposing direction and put us at odds with each other permanently. You know what I'm saying? And it if you're not in the space and understand how some of this stuff don't affect people the way, if you just walked into this, never haven't seen any of it, and walked into some of the panels, like you would be like, what in the world is going on here? This is craziness. Like, and if that is your only understanding, like you will have a negative negative interpretation of what our culture is like. You know what I'm saying?
So to me that sounds like that's suggesting that people's daily lives and the way people have lived is negative. So a lot of times when we see those interactions
Right.
between a black man and a black woman, when we see those interactions, oftentimes that's what actually plays out in real life. So it's like, who's to say who was right, who was wrong, what's negative, what's positive? So you could have a woman that completely agrees with the woman point of view on the interaction, and like, oh, she was kind of loud, but it all works out. Oh, he was kind of brash. If it's a man that may agree, like he was kind of brash, but I completely agree. So what makes the interaction and what we present here on YouTube positive or negative? I believe that maybe cussing each other out, maybe that's negative because that is,
Mm-hmm.
but the interaction itself, I don't necessarily believe is negative. It's one's lived perspective. Just my
That's the
opinion.
No,
point.
That's
no,
why I'm trying to dive into it.
that's valid. So I think what I'm essentially trying to say is, if you were to say, is this I'm looking at it as a net positive and net negative. So it's lots of positives that are within that interaction, because you have to have a dialogue between two people, and honesty has to be there. And of course, it might be contentious at points and all of that, right? But it's people that like, it's no reason that men and women should have a gender war. It's the silliest thing ever. Like keep it 100. That's just, we need each other, and that's it. Like, gender war should not exist. And for people to, hopefully don't nobody take none of this stuff off YouTube. You know what I'm saying? But I do know that people tend what is it? Art imitates life, or life imitates art. Did I say it in the right order?
Mhm.
And when I say net negative, that's what I mean. I wouldn't want to see somebody else at a bus stop like, you stood up too fast when the bus was coming, I'm holding you accountable. Like, no. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't want to see that interaction occur in everyday society, because for the most part, I see couples that's fighting and that be negative. But a lot of the interactions with black women and black men that I see in passing, they be kind of smooth. Like, it don't be, you know what I'm saying? It's not as contentious as it is on YouTube. It might be somebody that watched this all day angrily and go in the comments and do all that stuff, but in real life, they polite. They gonna hold the door open. They gonna, you know what I'm saying?
The thing that I'm concerned about is, if especially of the younger generation, because they are more apt to be watching YouTube, and they've just grown up in this space. And I think the older you are, you have a level of discernment because you've experienced life, you've seen things. But I guess what, I was having a conversation with a student today, and I can tell based on what he was saying. I can't remember how we got into conversation. So I was like, oh, I was actually listening to Trigger Mike's show about marriage or something, and he happened to walk in, and he heard me. So I was like, what do you think of marriage? Do you want to get married one day or whatever? And he was just like, he was like, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with marriage, but I don't agree with, the state sanctioned marriages, and like all of the YouTube talking points that I hear on here. He was literally quoting them. And I was like trying to ask him, well, what does that mean, to see if he really understood the context? Because he was talking about, yeah, because then, you have to pay alimony. And I mean, like, and so that for me was eye opening, because I'm like, wow, this generation is watching all of this stuff, may not necessarily have the mental capacity or just life experience to really understand what all of that means. And now they're taking that and applying that. And especially if they've grown up in a single led household, hearing a lot of the negative talk about single moms and the single mom bashing, and everybody hates their moms, it's the mom's fault, like all of that, it makes me wonder, as he gets older, how will his perspective impact the relationships that he begins to try to establish with women. So that was a concern for me.
So I want to add to that because I think like this is and Mistaken brought up the tone policing where this kind of makes the conversation a little bit muddy, right? Sometimes tone doesn't actually mean anything, right? Just because we're able to stay even keeled and have an even tempered argument doesn't mean that it's any more or less constructive than, people cussing each other out, right? I've seen people intellectually battle it out, and really it's just regurgitating points and it's no conversation moving forward. At the same time, I think that, fights can be very constructive, but the problem with the stuff that YouTube is perpetuating, especially with like, these panels and podcasts and stuff, is that everybody's talking about their feelings and their opinion, and nobody's really getting to what we're going to do to move forward. What have we learned? How are we going to do things differently? Is like, can people be like, oh, you know what? I was wrong. You were right. We're not seeing any of that stuff. And honestly, like if you watch a particular show long enough, you'll see growth in certain people, but you don't get that upfront accountability the same way that you do when people are like loud and wrong, right? So there isn't enough balance in these conversations, and there's not enough transparency of like people's development in these conversations. And so you're getting these snapshots that people are assuming are the entirety of a person or conversation.
Well, unfortunately, which comes into, or what this comes to, is negative and fights and stuff. It gets the views, it gets the clicks. So if you have a channel where you, let's say like JR, for example, if you have a channel and you want to keep bringing in those views, I mean, I would say majority of people, at least people that have a ton of subscribers, like they are bringing in an income and they want to continue to do that. So if something, let's say, two people fighting is going to has had the highest amount of clicks, then they're probably going to have those people on again or something. So it's like, unfortunately, that's just a part of it, for better, for worse. I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, honestly. But I mean, again, it's like, well, and then I'm already wondering, what does constructive, conversations even look like? Can people even agree on what the solution is, what the issues are, what they're getting out of it? And then it's also like, but then you got to consider the audience, and it's a lot. But I understand. I agree with what you're saying, though. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, whatever you incentivize typically leads. So if you get more money for, they've always said it, when negativity spreads faster than positivity, probably at a rate of 10 times. And yeah, if you incentivize something, it's hard to rationally expect somebody to not do that thing. Like, yeah, and negativity is run amok. Like it's always gonna be there. It's like Jerry Springer. Like that show probably was one of the longest running shows on daytime TV. And the problem though is when you desensitize people to what you're doing, you have to up that notch, and then you get to a place of no return, and you've normalized some things that really shouldn't be normal, and the interactions become just crazy. So that's why, because if it was in the adverse and we were normalizing treating each other better, and then the expectations for how we treat each other were raising, then I would be like, oh, it's a positive all across the board. but I haven't seen that yet. And maybe it could come. Maybe there might be a switch that gets flipped because sometimes you can burn out from certain things. But
Well, I think it goes back to what the AP said too. Is it's about being intentional in what you choose to watch. So I know, like a lot of times, watching some of these, you know, the YouTube shows, like it is interesting. I like to hear points, but I go in with the mindset of truly being open and trying to listen to both sides. And I don't think everyone necessarily does that. And then when you keep feeding into, like what he was saying, you typically listen to what you already feel, to listen to things that's going to validate those feelings, and then you continually watch it. So sometimes I have to be intentional, where I will stop watching this and specifically go to somewhere where I know I can hear something that I can apply to my life so I can grow. Like one of the ones that I do like to listen to is my Dear Future Wifey. I don't know if y'all watch that one, but I do like listening to that podcast because it does focus on marriage and relationships and things like that. And so if I say that I want to do the work and make my marriage better, I have to go in a space where that is what they're talking about. I can't, if I was to come here to get marriage advice, I probably wouldn't stay married after hearing what everybody is saying, because it's just, you know, some people are speaking from a place of hurt, you know, from their experience. So they're speaking from a place of hurt and what has happened, and then that's projected here, and they're telling everybody else that they should feel like that too. And so it's just like, you know, I have to be intentional about what I listen to for that reason.
right.
And
Okay.
um, no, there was a comment made that kind of puts all of this in perspective for me. And there was a comment by Jay Prince in the comments. He said, "Solutions end the fun," which to me that goes back to what you were saying, Coach K, as well as Marcus, about the negativity, the overconsumption of the negativity, because everybody in this space is looking for that aha viral moment. So they keep butting those heads, and instead of pushing for solutions, which I'm a solutions based person, instead of pushing for those solutions, it's let's keep this conversation as rowdy as possible. So maybe somebody decides to clip it, and then somebody else decides to clip it, and then it's running on TikTok, then it's running on Instagram. And I think that social media itself actually plays, like, broader than just YouTube. I think it all kind of plays a part in feeding the negativity. And that was just something that I didn't consider until he actually made that comment, which makes sense to me. And unfortunately, if we want to grow as a community, we have to become more solutions based and get away from the I need to become viral, and let's go more solutions.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Marcus. Then Enos, and then I want to add something. Go ahead.
So yeah, I think we should be able to find a line where we can where it can still be entertaining and find a solution. But it's just so hard because some of the problems, at least from my perspective, they seem kind of simple. It's like just do X, Y, and Z, don't deviate, and it's fixed. But that's what, 3 minutes? You know what I'm saying? Like you can't get a whole show out of that. Like vet appropriately. Here's the steps. Follow A, B, C. Like you could break all this stuff down. I think people make things more difficult than they need to be.
So I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think real life is just a little bit more complicated than that. Because we could always say, you know, vet this way, but you know, everybody comes with their own baggage and can't necessarily, or needs time to practice that, and will make like mistakes along the way, right? So yeah, of course you could, but like my thing is like, people who are doing this stuff should no longer be called content creators, because if you're a creative, then you're going to find ways to make solutions fun, right? Like that, if you're going to be that person who's going to put stuff out instead of replicating what already exists, why can't we find a fun way to deal with solutions? Why can't we find a fun way to try out different solutions to find out what works? Because at this point, we're not getting to the solution. So we don't know if the solution actually works because we're still caught up in the arguing phase, right? So if people really want to call themselves content creators, let's be really creative about what the solution looks like, and then we can have a conversation on whether solutions are fun or not.
Sometimes solutions are boring though, Coach Inez. It's like I'm just saying that like day to day life, when it's consistently okay, it's no excitement in that. You don't have the highs and the lows. Like I've heard somebody say before that the best sex you're gonna have is when you fighting with Jay. Shout out to Jay Prince. He was talking about the best sex you're gonna have is when you get the fist fighting or y'all cursing each other out, and then it's gonna be the most fluid activity that you've ever been involved in. And you're not gonna get that same type of intimacy from just role playing and doing other things. This is what people tend to believe. And I can see how a roller coaster of emotions can have that type of effect on you. The solution might not be live a good quality life where it doesn't go that far deviating from the standard and it's just good. But people want these highs and lows. Like it's like a heroin high. You be chasing a high.
Okay, so I think that's a good point, but like that goes to what I was saying about the creativity, right? So if all you know is this the toxic sex, right? Like if that's all you know, then you have no idea what tantric sex looks like, because you're not in a healthy enough place or haven't had healthy enough relationships or even capable of being vulnerable enough with your partner to understand what kind of fun that could be. You don't understand like other ways of like bringing excitement into a relationship that aren't detrimental to the people in the relationship. If we're not getting to the place of like, okay, this is boring, how can we spice this up in a way that doesn't threaten what we've built, right? We're not building, we're connecting through sex, and then we're using sex as a ploy to stay together, and then we're just like, which is creating problems within the community, and then we just sit here and talk about the community, right? Like it's its own perpetual state of negativity that continues to snowball and get bigger.
Shout out to the Karma Sutra. Tantric sex is great, but ups and downs.
That is a fact, sir.
But ups and downs that exist is for a reason. Some people like downer drugs. Some people like upper drugs. The tantric sex and the positivity is just uppers. So the wide gambit of emotions that people want to run through, you can't run through all of them if you don't have that toxicity. Because sometimes people just want to cry. They want a good cry. I'm not one of those people, but it's people who actually want that. Some people, it's like watching horror movies. You want to be scared. So they can run the full gambit of all the emotions by doing all of that toxicity. And by being a positive, you miss out on certain things because it's certain things that's just not healthy. And if you like in a space, like I'm not in a space where I could deal with toxicity and unhealthy stuff and I'm gonna continually be around it. So you miss out on that whole spectrum of negativity that's like addictive, the addictive negativity, the addictive toxicity.
Well, if I'm understanding Jay's point right, what he's saying is we take the hands out of it. Like, 'cause I would never condone an abusive relationship. What he's saying is when you argue, the best sex is after an argument. Am I right? Is that what he's saying?
Marcus, Speaker of the House.
I'm not trying to do that.
Clarify.
Right.
I'm not even trying to do that, to be honest with you.